Hi, this is Dr. Vincent recording another video about LDI and information regarding low-dose immunotherapy. This video is probably going to be the longest one I've recorded. The topic is dose reporting, or more specifically, how to report your response to a dose that you took. This is going to be long and there's multiple parts. I had to make myself an outline to make sure I kind of got all the topics within this. It's really, really important, and the first thing I want to talk about is why it's important. The reason it's important is getting your treatment correct with LDI hinges mostly upon how any given dose affects you. And for us to know that, it depends upon you conveying that information accurately, succinctly, and in a way that can be understood, okay? Because there isn't usually objective information for us to base success or failure of a given dose on. For most people, it has to do with how it affects your symptoms, and your symptoms are purely subjective, like fatigue, or brain fog, or pain, not usually something measurable with a laboratory test or some kind of device. For certain disease entities, like autoimmune hepatitis or polymyositis, there's a laboratory test that we can use to determine success or failure of any given dose, and those are pretty uncommon. A lot of people that we treat have something more like Lyme disease, or they have yeast sensitivity, or they have acne, or some other thing, where you have to tell me if the dose was good, bad, or indifferent in terms of the efficacy or what effect it had on your symptom. So that's why it's important, because everything we do, every decision we make about dosage and adjustment is based on how it affects your symptoms. Okay? What we need from you is detailed information, but not excessive information. So that's one of the difficulties. But we need details, and I need very specific feedback about certain things with no assumptions made. Don't assume that I know anything about the dose you took. So if you just say, I took my dose last week, that's not very good feedback, okay? If you say, I took my Lyme 20C dose on October 5th, that tells me what I need to know, okay? Don't say last week, don't say last month, don't say Thursday or Tuesday or last weekend. Give me an exact date, not a day of the week, because those occur every week, 52 times a year. And give me the exact dose, not I took my Lyme dose. I need to know which number, because oftentimes we send people multiple doses at a time. And even though we may have told you which dose to take on which date, that doesn't mean people always do that, unfortunately. So be specific, be precise. Don't assume that I know what you're talking about, because you're the one who's going to suffer when the communication goes awry, okay? Details. It's not that hard. Individual symptoms I need to know. Don't just say, I felt no different, which in case, that's actually useful, so I'll take that back. You can say, I felt no change in anything. That's fine, as long as it's true. But if you say, I was worse, and we know you have 5 different symptoms we're talking about, I need to know which ones were worse, and to varying degrees, or maybe all the same. But if you say, like, my fatigue, my joint pain, my insomnia, my brain fog were all worse by about, 40% for a week, that's fine. But I need you to delineate the symptoms. In Lyme disease in particular, it's really important because the mixture we use initially with the Lyme complex has 74 different species in it. And you may not react to all of them at the same place or the same dose. So if you are being treated for Lyme and you have reactivity to Babesia and Borrelia and Bartonella, but they cause different symptoms, the way we figure out how to separate them and titrate them individually is based on which symptoms respond and how. So for example, if you take the Lyme 20C and you say, oh, okay, I took this last week, don't do that. I took it on October 5th. And today's October 14th, just so you know, when I record this. So if you say that and you say, my sleeping is way better and my night sweats completely went away, then I'm going to think, okay, the Babesia dose portion of that is correct. But then you say, my fatigue is still a problem, I still have numbness and tingling in my feet, and my joints are still hurting the same. Then I'm like, okay, well, the Borrelia part hasn't taken effect yet. So then what I'll do is I'll have you take Babesia at 20 again next cycle, and I will send you some stronger doses of Borrelia by itself, okay? So this is where reporting individual symptoms makes a huge difference. I need to know that. It's also possible that certain symptoms get worse and some symptoms get better. We need to know all that detail. What I do not need to know is the specifics of the symptom. So don't go writing a paragraph describing your headache. Just tell me my headache was worse. Don't go writing, half a page describing every little nuance of your diarrhea. I just need to know that it got worse. Maybe I'm going 20 times a day instead of 12. That might be okay, but I don't need to know all the other glorious details about it, okay? That's important, breaking out the symptoms. And so we have created sort of a symptom reporting checklist form for some people to use that some people like and some people don't. But basically what we need to know is the date and dose you took. We need to know how long since you took it you're reporting, and I'll talk about delaying that report time and why that's important. And we need to know if any given symptom got better or worse or stayed the same. It's going to be one of those three outcomes with each individual symptom. That's it. I don't need to know that, all of the details of the symptom, because honestly with communication, less is more. If you just tell me the relative change, that's what I need to know. If you go on and on about the details and nowhere in there really tell me that this is better or worse than before, you have not communicated effectively. And that's a very common thing. People will write a page-long email and say, I feel terrible, my joints are hurting all the time, particularly my feet, especially if I go in this one particular store where they have really hard floors, but I like their flowers, so that's where I will prefer to shop. Don't do that, okay? That's a waste of your time and mine. But if you say, my pain is worse in my joints, that's great. But if you just describe the pain and nowhere tell me that that's better or worse than your baseline, you haven't told me what I need to know. It's just relative change from your baseline. And your baseline is only appreciated by you. I may have a previous note with my best description of your symptoms, but I don't want to have to compare a page-long description of your symptoms today with a page-long description of your symptoms 2 months ago. You just need to pay attention day to day and then tell me it's better or it's worse. That's the key to the whole thing, okay? Another common mistake is not to focus on particular symptoms. You may really hate your headaches more than anything else, but you need to create a laundry list of symptoms that you experience and check them all day by day. Because if certain symptoms get better or even go away, you won't even realize that happened unless you're paying attention to them on a checklist, because your primary concerning symptom may not have changed. So if you're just paying attention to your headaches, you may not notice that the tingling in your toes went away, or that your heart palpitations quit happening, or that your night sweats stopped occurring. You're just going to say, my headaches haven't changed. And even worse, you might say, I'm not any better. Okay? The problem with that is if just your headaches are still there, but these other symptoms got better, what it might mean is that certain antigens in the mixture you received were good. They were the right dose. And if you just tell me, I'm not any better, I'm going to give you a stronger dose of that whole mixture. And then those symptoms that had improved with that previous dose are now going to flare and get worse. So you need to comprehensively go down your list and make sure that none of those things have been affected. Don't just focus on your favorite symptom, okay? Which is tongue-in-cheek because it's usually your least favorite symptom, but it's the one you have a tendency to pay most attention to. You got to pay attention to all of it. Subtle differences, partial improvements make a difference. That means that maybe we're getting close to the right dose and we slow down the progression of titration, which we'll talk about in another video, dose titration, I want you to wait at least a week before you report your response, because some people don't really have a response that's obvious for about a week after their dose. For some people, it's as long as 2 weeks, but making everybody wait 2 weeks makes the whole system way more cumbersome. The vast majority of you are going to be able to perceive your response within a week of the dose. So 1 week later, I want to know. Don't email the day after your dose and tell me that something seems bad. Not that I don't want to know that, but I want to know how long that bad lasts. And maybe it'll only last a day or two. Maybe it'll last the whole week. But I want you to wait a full week before I hear from you. People will have a tendency to report things 2 days later, but then there's another email 3 days later, and 4 days later, and 5 days later. And so instead of one email report at 7 days, I'm getting 5 email reports. And all I need is the one, okay? The more often you attempt to communicate, the harder it is to figure out what's going on, and the slower you will get your response, and you'll be frustrated, and so will I. So just wait a week and take notes every day. And you can say, yeah, I was way worse. My joints were worse, my fatigue was worse, my headaches were worse from day 2 to day 5. And now I feel back to baseline 7 days later. That's great. But if you had emailed me on day 3 just complaining about how much worse you felt, all I would say was, let me know when you return to baseline. And so that's the communication you'll get, because that's the end of the story I need to know. Why? Because if you flare, and I have a whole other video on flaring, the duration of that flare helps me identify what dose we need to move you to. So I want all of that information in one communication, if at all possible. So you need to wait that week, okay? The timing of your symptoms are really critical, because people don't always have a change in symptoms that is really caused by the dose. So if something seems to get worse or better, like 1 or 2 days after your dose, it's probably associated with the dose. But if somebody says, I think I started to get worse again 2 weeks after my dose, if we don't hear from you a week later, and then a month later or 6 weeks later, you just email and say, I need my doses again, but that last one was bad. I'm going to go, wow, I really need to know what happened in that first week. That tells me a lot. You say, well, about a month ago, I started to have really bad joint pain again. I'm like, well, then that means the first 2 or 3 weeks, maybe your joint pain went away. And perhaps that dose was good, and then it wore off at 2 or 3 weeks, and your joint pains came back. And your perception of that was it got worse. Well, I need to know if it got better first. So the timing and progression of what happens after a dose is really, really important. If you don't report a week or so later, and you just communicate, or people who come in the office in person, you just come in 7 weeks later for your dose, and you tell me, I don't feel well, that doesn't help me at all. I need to know what happens in the first 7 to 10 days, okay? So if you just come back and tell me, I feel terrible now, no, that's what you said day 1. So what I need to know is relative change in that first week, okay? That determines what we do. And the last point on my little outline to mention again is less is more, so be succinct. Just give me the date, the dose, the symptoms, and whether they're better or worse, and for how long. That's the other thing I will reinforce, is how long you were better is really useful. How long you were worse is super useful. How long you're worse is useful because then we back off accordingly. How long you're better is useful every dose cycle, because I want to make sure that your period of improvement gets longer and longer and longer as we repeat the dose. So if you took the Lyme 20C the first time you got it and you felt great for 2 weeks, headaches, joint pain, night sweats, fatigue, whatever, improved for 2 weeks, the next time you get it, I want you to improve for 3 weeks or longer. And then the next time, maybe 4 weeks or 5 weeks. If you're plateaued and you're only getting 3 weeks of success out of this dose over and over, then we make a little incremental increase in the dose. Or we give you booster doses to figure it out. And so the next video I'll record, I'll have the same t-shirt on. You'll like that. It's going to be on booster dosing.